All right, welcome to the Wayfinder podcast. I am Jeremy,
I'm Tyler.
I'm Jacob.
and over there, that's fake Tommy. Tommy is not with us tonight. He is, I think, in Chattanooga. Is he
I
in
think that's
Chattanooga?
right. I
Yeah,
think that's right. Yeah.
How you doing tonight, Tommy?
doing
That's good.
guys.
That's good.
I wish I could be like a ventriloquist and do Tommy impersonations. Like, hey, doing pretty good, guys. How you doing?
Yeah.
I don't sound anything like Tommy. But anyway, I did superimpose a picture of him just so you guys can't see it, but I feel like Tommy's here with us. So when I speak tonight, I'm going to speak on behalf of Tommy.
Yeah, there you go. That'll work.
Yeah. So if you guys disagree with me on anything, I'll be like, what do you think, Tommy? He's going to be like, I agree with you completely.
Hey, at least we're going to split the room tonight then.
I find no fault in what you said.
I can find no fault within you. This sounds like more Lord of the Rings references.
Kind of weird.
But anyway, tonight we're following up on what we started with last week. We were talking about church hurt, and this week we're moving forward with church hurt, but I want to look at something from a different perspective, talking about discipline. Because a lot of times church hurt happens because somebody has to discipline somebody. And when that, or somebody, I should have said someone, that sounds more professional. Somebody sounding like I'm from Mississippi. You know, we don't add the extra two S's when we talk in Mississippi. We just say Mississippi. I can say it because I'm from Mississippi. And anyway, it's like somebody. It's like someone, I think is the proper English there. But anyway, I got into an English lesson. But whenever we're talking about correction, you know, whether it's that person being corrected for something they've done or whether someone had to correct their child or a family member or a spouse or maybe even just corrected bad theology. You know, sometimes it's bad theology that gets people upset. You start to say something that they've been raised to believe is one way, and even though you present it, you know, from the gospel 100% with truth, they still can't receive it because they're like, well, I don't care. That's what my mom always said. Remember one time I was talking about things that were not in the Bible, and I talked about cleanliness is next to godliness is not in the Bible. And man, I had this lady get tore up at me. It's like, I've heard it my whole life and I know it's there. And I'm like, it's not there. I promise. I'm not being mean. It's just not there. It's like, my mama said it every day. And then my mama said it's in the Bible. I'm like, they must cut that verse out. I don't know. But, you know, people get tore up about things like that. And then they try to say that it's church hurt, but it's not really church hurt. What it is it's their pride and not being willing to admit when they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes church hurt is not actually church hurt at all. It's just stubbornness and pride. And we can all fall to that. We've all been in a place where we've stepped out of line or done something that, you know, we shouldn't be doing. And when someone tried to bring correction upon us, discipline, rather than receiving that and growing from it, we become bitter and angry and say, well, you know what, and meanies, I'm not going to go back there anymore. If they're going to try to tell me to live right, I want to live how I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's my intro. So take it away, Tyler.
Take it away, Tyler.
Or Jake, or anybody.
I think
Tommy? Anything, Tommy?
Tommy, you got a lot to say tonight, ain't you, buddy?
No, I'm good. I'm just stay quiet.
So I'll get started. I'll start tonight. First of all, I'll say I'm glad to be here this evening, man. I enjoy doing this with you guys.
We love you too.
Man, I love y'all, man. Y'all are awesome guys. Y'all the coolest folks I know in this room. Hey, I take the compliment and run with it.
What about Tommy? Does that count? Because he's not technically in the room.
He's here technically on the screen. I just can't see him.
Just act like he's next.
Hey, we're
to
going
you.
to shout out to him. We love you, Tommy.
I love you, Tommy.
But no, I want to take it through the eyes of Jesus, man, and then what Jesus teaches in discipline. You find, like you said, you find this thing that when people do, a lot of times get corrected. They usually get offensive about it, and they usually tuck tail and they'll run to another church, and then they'll bounce to another church when they don't like what goes on there, and when things need to be changed in their life. And I think that's the biggest thing is that we all as humans, even us in this room, struggle with sin in our lives of some way, shape, form, or fashion. And when we get corrected about it, we don't like it because it's sin. It's something that our flesh desires. But I've really been into listening to Matthew 18 here lately. I've been listening to it. It's been in my spirit here lately, and it's been really pressing. I've read it a bunch of times, probably just as you have. But I like this. You know, at the time when these scriptures were translated, you know, it wouldn't. You know, we're gonna stop here. Man, this was a storyline of what Jesus was speaking, and in Matthew 18, you know, Jesus starts off by the temptations to sin that we see there. I'm not going to go into because I'll be here all night reading. And then it goes into talking about the parable and the lost sheep, you know, the 99 to go get the one. See that? Why is Jesus leading up? He starts talking all about temptations to sin. Then he talks about the one that's going to leave the 99. Then he goes into teaching if your brother sins against you. Then he talks about the unforgiving servant. See, there's three things that we got going on here, and this is Lord help me through this, Holy Spirit. So how Jesus is teaching this right here is that we're all going to fall short. We're all going to have sin in our lives. And some of that sin may send us in another direction away from the church. It may send us away from things, and most of the time it's sin that we don't want to cope with and deal with. Then we get to that correction part of it. It talks about if our brother sins against us, we have to do this and we have to do that. First, it says if you got an alt with someone, you got an issue with things going on, not just because you don't like it. I mean, an authentic issue that should be addressed and changed. This is where a lot of times that hurt starts. You take a pastor or someone in a leadership role that pulls someone to the side, or it could be just anybody getting correction. Usually just this first step will just make people run because, well, they don't like the way I live. They don't, you know, we get into that defensive mode of like, I'm not going, or the offensive mode of I'm not going to listen to these people because they think they're above me. Well, that's where we got to have that submission to know that we got to submit to something or someone and have that in our life. And it says, secondly, that if that person won't receive you, then you take a couple, a brother, sisters, or someone that's wise, that understand that ain't going to be all about adding to the drama or making things worse, that can help you fix this situation. Jesus is teaching this here. Then you got thirdly, then if they don't want to listen to all of y'all, then we'll go third. Then we're going to bring it before the church and let the church know that the sin that's tempted you so long, that's caused you to drift away, that's caused the issue, is now going to be brought before the church. And we're going to let them know there is some unrepented sin in their life. And see, there's a chance that one of these three things is what's going to offend someone, that's going to hurt someone that they don't like to. You see it all the time in the world. You see these big mega churches, their pastors fall short. They get corrected on the next thing you know, they're tucking tail and they're leaving. See, if you actually look back in that time, and this is the part that I've learned, at that time, it was shameful if the church, people wanted to be involved in church at this time. If you actually look back at that time of church, once they were pushed out of the church, it was kind of like this shameful thing, like, I want to be back in. I want to get back in the church. You don't see that in American culture.
No.
Yeah, so when people get offended or hurt, they'll want to jump ship and move to the next church. You know, and them times they never were like that. They wanted to be part of the church. There was hunger there. They knew that there was a purpose in being there, and a lot more details to that. I'm just simplifying it tonight. But then here comes that part that Peter asked at the end of it. So what about the unrepentant? So how many times do we forgive these people? How many times do we forgive these people? And Jesus says 7 times 7. Time and time and time and time again. Let's keep it simple. I like to get it simple. Time and time and time again.
Yeah.
But see, our problem is as the person that's usually offended, we don't like correction. Why don't we like correction? It's the flesh. How can we change that? Well, we've got to understand that when someone corrects us, it's just like the Spirit's, the Lord has put someone in your path that can help you and direct you and change the path that you're on. The direction is not to throw you out of the church. We don't ever want to throw you out of the church.
Right.
The church should be able to accept that. That's what that was. So all back in the first, I went in the early church here that we're talking of, is when they finally repented, they could come back to the church and say, "Hey, I fell short. Will you accept me back in?" See, church has caused so many separations. You see these denominations. You see all these crazy things that's split the church. And it's caused what we see today in the world. They see discord among the brethren. They see all these things that's going on, and it's caused all these confusion. And it says that he is not the author of the confusion. So how do we get back to where we should be? Is first of all, I think this is the biggest thing that we need to discipline ourselves to, is trusting God in our work and our works and or our walk and what we're doing here. Two, we need to know that it's okay to forgive people sometimes. Here in the Western church, we don't do that.
Yeah.
A lot of times we put it on our shoulders and we carry it, and we just keep whooping up on people and just start gossiping. And I've been guilty of it. Start gossiping, start changing things up and saying they did this and adding to it and taking away from it and making the story when it should be loving on people instead.
And I want to add there too, because I think a lot of times people think that if you talk about a situation, they immediately label that as gossip.
Yeah.
There's a difference between gossip and discussing a situation with an individual. Church leadership has to discuss issues with an individual, about an individual. That is not gossip. Gossip would be if you say, "Oh, did you hear about so-and-so? They did this and this and this." That's gossip. If I come to you guys as leadership and I say, "Hey, we have a situation here with this individual, and we've got to come up with a plan of how we're going to deal with it," that's not gossip. That's preparation. That's being wise in our handling of individuals. Because here's the thing: when you're a leader in a church, you've got to help multiple people, and you also have to navigate certain situations. But it seems like if somebody finds out that you had a meeting to talk about them, they're like, "Well, they're gonna gossip about me." Well, no, we're not gossiping about you. We're discussing something because there's a concern there, and we've got to figure out the healthy way for the entire church to move forward around this situation. We have to discuss it. And sometimes you need to discuss things before you take anything to that person. It needs to be discussed
Absolutely.
among leadership. So anyway, I just wanted to add that because you mentioned gossip, and a lot of times people perceive gossip, but just mentioning someone in a situation with someone is not gossiping. It really is the motive you have for why you're talking about. If you're talking about so you can get a good laugh at someone's expense or just share a bunch of drama about somebody else's life, that's gossip. If you're informing someone so they can be made aware of a situation, that's not gossip.
Yeah. And see, I think that's probably where I was going with it. Probably the number one thing that the Western church, that would be the American church, we don't like confrontation
At all.
Like that's the part that when we get ready to confront someone, we would prefer to just say, you know what, instead of taking it to the Lord and say, hey, will you help me, guide me, give me the words that I need to say, Holy Spirit. Instead, we get upset, we tuck our tails, and we go to another church. And more than likely, we're going to find something that's the same thing as what we're running from. Because if we keep running from something, it's going to keep chasing you. Because that's how he can deceive you. The enemy can deceive you. But we don't like conflict. We don't like to confront issues in any scenario. And that's the hardest thing. We can't even do step one.
Right.
And then when step one is avoided, step two happens. Like you said, we try to figure out the best solution to help the church. And next thing you know, they're hurt because we're trying to figure out the solution that can help them the most. And then three, they usually done cause so much discord. Everyone already knows before you even announce it. See, we're completely backwards in the Western church and where we're at today here in America. And I say that's the American church, that we've got this all backwards. We should be wanting to fellowship with one another. Mm-hmm. We should never want to have to throw someone out of the church. We should never have to, because that's not the goal that the Lord come here for. That's not what the goal is. That is for us to be in unity, to love one another, to be able to correct, rebuke, and exhort. That's what a pastor's supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to be doing, and no one likes that.
No, and people like to make assumptions too.
Yeah.
They like to assume that something is going on, even when it's not. We all know who those folks are, and who's going to be the first one to ask you. And every church has it. Every workplace has it. Every family has it. There's someone who will never reach out to help you, but you better believe if there's some drama, they're going to be the first one to ask you, what's going on? And it's like, how about you worry about how we take care of that person instead of just wanting to know the drama?
Yeah.
Well, and I think you kind of have to dig into it and really start to ask yourself why. And I think that is something that we as an American culture, we as a church, we don't do that. We don't ask why. We don't try to figure out the substance or the foundation of it. And I feel like the reason we avoid confrontation so much is because confrontation a lot of times brings up offense. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason we're so easily offended is because we base our beliefs on emotions. Mm-hmm. Man, I was thinking about this week, man. Like how many times Have I decided on decided my opinion on something based off of these emotions or these thoughts that I've decided, this is kind of what I want it to be. And the thing is you really have to dig into it and start to, it says in the Bible, you have to take every captive or every thought captive and submit it to God. And that's the thing is we don't do that because the reason we don't do that is because we want to have an emotion based belief system instead of saying, God, I don't care what my emotions are. I don't care if it lines up with my thoughts. I want to know what you believe. And we're supposed to submit it to them. And I think that's why so many people avoid confrontation or having open discussion about things is because it's not a matter of God. We're arguing God's belief versus God's belief. It's your emotional opinions on it versus my emotional opinions on it. And that's when offense comes up.
Yeah. You're right. And that's what a lot of people think. Well, I go to church, well, there ain't going to be no conflict. We get this idea in our mind a lot of times and that's what usually causes to hurt the most. It's like you're getting ready to go to buy a new car. You get there, you've even got the down payment and everything, and then they run your credit. You're like, can't get that car, I guess I'll settle with the Kia Soul, But that's what Jesus is saying, and this is the word that was pulled out to me, and everything that I've been learning here. And there was a word there that Jesus used, and it was if. So that means there's going to be a win, and this is how we're going to have to do it. And this is how you're going to have to view people. This is how you're going to have to love them. And if we as the church can figure this out, instead of how all of us walking around and going to the next church down the street and talking about that church that we just left, instead of doing that, how about we turn around and this is how we correct it, like Jesus says, and we're going to say, we're going to get on our knees. We're going to start warring for one another instead of warring against one another. And that's the problem we have. And that's what causes that offense. Like I said, we let our emotions take control before we do our spirituality and our relationship with Jesus. We start viewing it the way we want to see it instead of the way he sees it. Because that means the way he's teaching that, he's telling us there's going to be some hurt come. There's going to be some pain come. But this is how you get by. And that's what Peter was asking. How many times do we forgive them, Lord? How many times do we forgive them? 7 times 70. We're going to keep doing it over and over and over and over and over. And that's because that's what I would do for you. And that's what I came here to do, to let you know there's some grace, there's some mercy here. There is everything that you need is right here, and you're seeing it, you're talking to it, and this is what you're going to have to do.
And I think one of the reasons we don't leave enough room for mercy when it comes to the church and when we come into the church is we don't expect anybody to be perfect at work. We don't expect anybody to be perfect outside in society. But for some reason, when we come to church, we expect people to just miraculously become perfect human beings with no flaws, with no problems. It's like we're at church, so they should be perfect now. And I heard it one time. It was actually John Schlitt, lead singer for Petra. I know it's amazing to you guys that I would make a Petra reference in any point of life, but John Schlitt was in an interview, and they were talking about a story of something that happened on the road. I won't tell his story. It's way better if he tells it. But he made a comment, and it really stuck with me. And it was like, I'm a Christian. I'm just not a perfect one. And, a lot of times we're like, I'm a Christian, so that means I've got to be perfect. If anybody sees that I'm flawed, if anybody sees that I'm vulnerable, then suddenly that's going to lessen what people perceive me to be as a Christian. They'll be like, oh, he's not a real Christian because he's not perfect. Here's the thing. You don't expect anyone to be perfect anywhere except for in the church. And then suddenly you expect them to be perfect people. I'm not perfect, but I serve a perfect Savior. I'm not perfect, but I serve a perfect God. He is perfect, and I strive every day to be more and more like him, but I'm still going to fail. I'm still going to say stupid things all the time and be like, why did I say that? I mean, I've already said stupid things in this podcast tonight. Why? Because I'm about half uneducated redneck half the time, and things come out of my mouth, and I'm like, that didn't make any sense. Why'd I say that? Because I'm not perfect.
But see, you just said something there. See, people put that mindset in it, and that's what comes to hurt again, is that even in the book of Acts, he used they were uneducated men. They had no teaching of whatsoever, but they had a relationship that stood out amongst it all. And that's what I think that's what we lack so much of, is that relationship status. We have more of I'm gonna sound bad saying this, more of a religious like relationship more in the American culture than we do the relationship status. And when we start seeing that relationship status, the religious start coming against it, and that ends up defeating the relationship that you had. And it may have been a small relationship, but it was something that was planted there that give you that hunger to know that person, know Jesus on a different level. But we let religion step in and say, that's not right.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I stopped wearing a suit and tie to church. I don't have a problem with the suit and tie, but when I first became a pastor, um, man, every Sunday I was wearing a full suit. I know that's hard for anyone watching to believe, but I mean, I had a tie, I had a jacket, I had a colorful suit. Man, the hair was, perfect. Because my perception was the people have to think that I am holy, and they have to see holy appearance because it's how I grew up to be trained that, you're a preacher Sunday morning, you better look like a preacher.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me that Jesus never went out and called a Pharisee to come and be his disciple. They looked perfect. Instead, who'd he go? He went and found first and foremost a bunch of East Galilean rednecks. I mean, if they lived in Alabama today, they'd have been a bunch of catfishermen who smelt bad out on a catfish boat, flat bottom, out on the Tennessee River. That's who they were, and that's who Jesus called. He didn't call educated, high society, dressed up, slicked hair preachers. He called regular, everyday men to come and follow him and be fishers of men. And that was kind of a change in my heart when I was like, what am I doing? Like, this isn't me. I mean, I came up as a skateboarder, punk rocker, Christian rocker kid. And then suddenly it's like, well, if I'm going to preach, then I've got to become this whole other transformed figure, wear some long sleeves to hide my tattoos and wear a dress code and a little tie clip and look fancy. And if that's you, if that's legitimately who you are, then by all means be true to that and wear your suit and tie and preach the gospel. But for me, number one, I pastor a church in the inner cities of Sheffield, Alabama, behind the Hillcrest Motel, in an area where people need someone they can relate to, who they can say, hey, this guy right here looks like he can understand me, but he's been able to overcome the temptations of the flesh and to succeed in life because of what Jesus did for him, and be relatable. And we saw that yesterday with our fall festival, people who we felt approachable. It wasn't like, Pastor, good to meet you, and like intimidated. I mean, they had no problem coming up and putting a pie full of whipped cream right in my face or any of you guys' faces because we were relatable to them. They saw us that we're just regular men, but we love Jesus, and he was able to take even somebody as messed up as us and use us in a mighty way. And I think when people can start to view followers of Jesus in that way, to realize they're regular people, then maybe some of that hurt can be curved away from. And then maybe they could take some discipline a little better if it's from somebody that they realize gets them on that level. Because that's the thing, is it's hard to take discipline from someone that you don't feel like understands you.
Yeah.
When you feel like someone understands you and knows where you're coming from, it's a little easier for them to say, hey, let me tell you this because I've been there. And you're going down a bad path. Now, they may reject that, but I do think it's easier to receive that from someone who you feel like is, been where you've been and understands what it is to be you, where someone who it doesn't appear has ever been in that situation or knows where you're coming from is kind of like, what do you know? You don't know me. You ain't been where I've been. You ain't been poor like me. Oh, wait a second. I've been exactly where you are. And I think that helps, and that's about being authentic. You've got to be authentic. God is looking for authentic men and women to serve him that people can relate to and understand that, look, I'm not perfect. I struggle, but I overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of my testimony saying, this is who I was and this is who I am.
That's right.
I've been hurt, but I overcome. I've been trampled upon, but I overcome. I have doubts. I have fears. I have my Elijah moments where I go hide under a broom tree and pray, God, just let the end come upon me. But I overcome those things just like you can overcome those things by the blood of Jesus Christ. Because I know that he's for me, and if he's for me, who can be against me?
I want to share a personal story from just today and kind of going into that, just the relatable aspect of it. So today, Rowan, my youngest one, he's constantly sick. He's constantly dealing with something. He's got asthma. He was hospitalized multiple times. His first year of life. It was really scary. As a dad, and Cal was adopted, but he was 2.5. So that was the first time of going through the infant stages. So it was really scary. And now we try to monitor things a little more closely than we would have with Cal because he wasn't nearly as sick. So today, Rowan's been running fever for 48 hours. He's been having complaining of headaches, and his throat looks awful. Tonsils are swollen, little white pus pockets on there. Does not look good. So I took him, and I'm not going to say who they are because the people they treated us nicely, but what we were seeking was medical help. We weren't seeking somebody that was friendly. I was going to to one office that was specialized in pediatrics, and kind of we explained the symptoms that we were going through, this, that, and the other, and explained it with his throat, and they didn't even look in his throat. So I kind of left a little concerned, and the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, man, I'm not okay with this. Like, how are you going to diagnose a problem when I've told you what the symptoms are and you didn't even look in the area where the symptom was? And man, that's a whole, like, a sermon in itself.
Yeah.
But so we went, and he went with his grandma, and I just didn't feel about it later on. So I was like, I'm going to take him somewhere else. Well, I took him somewhere else, and they kind of glanced in his throat, but it was very quick. And they said, it looked fine. And I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse practitioner. I'm not even a nurse. But I can tell looking in his throat that it's not supposed to look like that. And I know my child, and I know that, like, the way he's talking right now, it sounds like he's talking with a lisp because his tonsils are so swollen and so close to touching each other. I'm like, it's a problem. Now, I'm not saying it's, a life or death situation, but we need to treat the symptoms and not just throw out medication.
Right.
So the reason I say all that is because I was frustrated with it. And, in all honesty, not that I'm, like, mad at those people and I'll never talk to them again, but I will probably never go back to either one of those practices. But the reality of it is the next time that Rowan's sick, I'm not going to say I'm never going back to a doctor ever again.
Right.
Because he's still going to need medical help that I cannot provide.
That's right.
In the same sense, when it comes to church hurt's real. Just like malpractice is real and with doctors and things like that. So to sit here, and I'm not saying we're doing this, but a lot of times people try to act like, well, church hurt's not really a big thing. You're just being oversensitive and this, that, and the other, and you've church hopped. I fully believe that there's times where people wind up in a church that it's malpractice and they're not teaching the authentic gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So leaving that church because you've been hurt because of the bad teachings is one thing, but you're not going to say, well, they did me wrong, or they left me more confused than I ever was, so I'm just quitting Jesus altogether. I'm quitting church altogether. That's what happens. And that's exactly what happens. That's the dangerous part. The dangerous part isn't necessarily saying, well, this church hurt me, validated or not, and you go somewhere else. As long as you're going somewhere that teaches the Bible and loves on people, I'm okay with that. Man, and that's the thing is there used to be this mindset of, if you start going to church here, you have to stay here at this church for the rest of your life. Now, I think sometimes it gets a little carried away. And if you're bouncing to new churches every year, every 2 years, then there's no consistency, there's no faithfulness. But the reality is that when you have a sickness, and we all do, it's called sin. We all fall short. But the thing is that we can't quit seeking medical help altogether because we went to one place and it failed us. And the thing is that you can't put your full hope in the church anyways.
That's true.
It's just kind of a place that helps encourage you and builds you up. And if that place is not that, then you do need to find somewhere that's relatable to you. So the relatable aspect of it is that I'm not going to go to a heart doctor when Rowan's having breathing problems.
That's right.
Not because that doctor's uneducated, but because he specializes in a heart and how the heart works. So that's another thing, is that you need to go to a church that specializes in the kind of person you are. We have different personalities. People are all wired differently. People think differently, act differently. So in the foundation of it, if it points to Jesus, go somewhere that you do relate to. And I fully support that 100%.
That made me think too, how many people that they're afraid to go to a different church because their families don't go there or something that
yeah.
they're,
Mhm.
you know, how many people, so I'm just going to avoid it altogether because they don't want to hurt grandma or mom or dad.
Yep.
Just think about that, man. And the question is, how do we change that? How do we change that thought process?
And I don't know the answer to that question.
That's all I
How,
know.
how do you fix the thought process? But I know how to address the issue. I just don't know how you change the person's heart and mindset, because I remember a guy years ago, great man, absolutely fantastic man. And he went to a church, and we were at a Baptist church together, and we had membership. You know, here at the Way, we don't have membership. You come, you join in the fellowship with us, we count you as a member.
Mhm.
Like we don't have to have some role. You just plug in and get involved. We love you. We're part of the church. We're all our names are written in a membership roll called the Book of Life.
That's it.
So we're all part of the same church, no matter where you go that's preaching truth. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you're part of that. But he wouldn't join the church. And the reason he wouldn't join the church is because he had made a promise to his mother years ago that he would always be a member of the Methodist denomination. So even though he had not stepped foot back in that denomination in years and years and years, he was still, his mom not even alive to witness it, he would not join a church that he was plugged into and faithful to, because he was afraid of disappointing mama. So he stuck with something that he himself did not really feel a part of. And, you know, that's an extreme truth there. Because to say I'm going here because that's where my family goes and I've been hurt and I feel ostracized, but I'm going to keep going and putting myself through this. They're not teaching truth. I disagree, but I'm going to stay there because I don't want to disappoint my family. That's one thing. But for your family to not even be around anymore, but you're so ingrained in you that I'm going to disappoint them if I do this. I'm going to disappoint them if I even do something that you believe is right, but I can't do what's right because I don't want to disappoint them, and they're not even there to see it. That's how deep rooted some people are in tradition, that they cannot get past that, no matter how bad it's hurting them. They'll fall away and just stop going to church completely before they go somewhere else because they're afraid of disappointing. And I've had people tell me that. I've got a dear friend. He may even watch this. I'm not sure, but he may actually watch these. I know he comments on Facebook stuff all the time. And we grew up together. Me and him, we got baptized in the same church, and he got hurt. He got deeply hurt. He had some past things in his life, and he tried to get his life right. And he was used and just kind of ostracized from this church group because of past things in his life that he was trying to overcome. And when I've talked to him about getting in church, it's like, well, you know, I grew up this. So if I go back to church, I got to go to this, and I just don't feel at place, but I'm going to come visit y'all. So, you know, but even though he's been hurt by that, and his parents have passed on, great people, love them, man. His mama's a wonderful woman of God. Still, there's so much of that. Even though I've been hurt there, I guess I just won't go anywhere because I don't want to go back there, but that's where I'd have to go if I go back. Man, that's such a scary place to be when you've been hurt, but you're so afraid of disappointing someone else that you're not even able to go find somewhere that's healthy, that's going to nurture you and bring you back to the place you need to be with God.
And that's those mindsets. There's not necessarily a fix to it or a solution.
Yeah.
But first off, I wanted to say this earlier and it slipped my mind, but man, God, I thank you that you put me in situations that are uncomfortable. I thank you that you put me in situations that frustrate me, because then I can be taught. Then I'm in a moment that is a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of it, is that we get to this point very early in our Christian beliefs that we're like, this is it. This is where I've drawn the line. These are my core beliefs and I'm not changing that. And the reason why we do that is because of this false mindset that if we give up on one thing, if we admit one wrong of like, maybe I misinterpreted that, maybe I misunderstood that, then the world attacks us, or in our mindset, we feel that's going to happen. And it happens. It really does.
Yeah.
But it's like our whole religion just unravels because of this one area that we've missed it. And I want every viewer to know that if you're wrong and that you missed it, God would much rather teach you and show you how you can be right And instead of you spending an entire lifetime just being right, or he can correct you to teach you how to be right, instead of just saying, well, I'm right because I don't want to be wrong and I don't want people to correct me on it, or I don't want people to think, well, if you were wrong there, where else are you wrong at? And
Yeah.
that happens a lot. So we get such a stronghold of like, man, I'm going to die on this hill because if I admit one fault, then I feel like I've lost my entire platform.
Yeah, and also, we're talking about the discipline side of church hurt. A lot of times it's like if you get corrected on one issue, you can be doing a million things right. And if there's one thing that someone tries to critique you on, it's like it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
Like, why am I even trying? I was doing all this, and I was doing this and this and this, but they had to tell me I was wrong there. And it's like devastating. Why are we so fragile to the point where we're beyond correction? And I was thinking about the scripture earlier in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5, and halfway through 5, and it's talking about how we've forgotten that God addresses us as sons. And I just wanted to read through this because a lot of times we think of correction as something that is bad, like I'm about to get whooped, I'm about to be corrected, and we just blow up like, how dare you? Like, you hurt me.
Yeah.
Why'd you do this? But the Bible tells us, it says that God addresses us as sons, that my son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. If a preacher and your leadership in your church are not taking the time to correct you and just letting you do whatever you want to do, that means they don't care about you. They don't consider you an important asset to that ministry and to that body of believers, because they're just letting you go about your way because they don't care if your life lines up with the Word of God. They don't care if you are walking the straight and narrow. You don't matter to them. And a lot of people will go somewhere where they're invisible to a church that doesn't address their sin, that doesn't address the things that they're doing that are not in line with God's word. They don't address their poor doctrine and other things that are planted in their lives, because they're like, well, they tithe and they're a body on a seat, and we all know we'd rather preach to people on seats rather than empty seats. That's why I'm glad Tommy's here tonight. I've got somebody here and not just an empty seat. Hi, Tommy. Hey, guys. But we're afraid to be disciplined because we're afraid of being hurt. But at the same time, if we're not being disciplined, then that means no one cares enough about us to make sure we're doing what's right, because they don't consider us an asset to the church. And you go down to, and I wanted to finish with this here, verse 11. It says, For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, lift your drooped heads. I like this. Lift your drooped hands and strengthen your weak knees. And I think about that because we get our feelings hurt and we're just like, and we're just drooped over, just in defeat. But it's like, man, like, you should really be glad that someone cared enough that you mattered enough, that you weren't invisible, that someone took the time to pull you aside and say, hey, let me help you out here. Don't need to do that. Because if they're not doing that, then that means you don't matter to them. So, I take that stuff personal, when it comes to making sure that people are disciplined. And I think that's also, if you define the word discipline, a discipline can be a set of beliefs. When we talk about, religion, what discipline do you follow? And that's talked about in all religions. But, the discipline we follow, I pray, I seek God, I pray on behalf of others. I come and I fellowship. I don't forsake the gathering of myself together with other saints. I read my Bible. Those are disciplines. And discipline is a good thing. Now, you can discipline someone wrongly. You can do it out of anger, and you can do it out of the intention to hurt someone. But if someone is telling you something that you're doing wrong in order to correct you, to help you to do it right, don't allow that to eat you up and cause you to run away from that church group or from that body of believers. That should make you realize how valuable you are to them because they took the time to try to get you back on a path so that you would be in right standing with the fold and believing rightly. Um,
I'm glad you went there because I wanted to bring that up too, kind of like on the flip side. So, calling us guys out here is that a lot of times, and I think about it with me and my children, a lot of times we bring the correction, we bring the discipline in the sense of like, okay, this is where we need to improve. And a lot of times the reason we do that is because it's brought to our attention and to our awareness because it makes our lives difficult.
Yeah.
So when I get a call from school that Cal's not acting right, I want to discipline him and correct him because it's making me uncomfortable. But at the same time, the way that I have to discipline myself is that I need to be putting the same discipline and the same mindsets into Cal more often of Cal, you're doing this good. Cal, you did that very well. Cal, I'm so proud of you for how you acted today because we want to discipline them and calling out the areas that they mess up because it makes us look bad or it makes us uncomfortable or it makes us struggle. But the hard part is when you have to discipline yourself and say, man, I'm proud of you. Or like, hey, I noticed you did that and nobody asked you to do that. Or, like I've noticed that, you've been really faithful. I'm super glad that you're here, this, that, and the other. That's the hard part as a leader is disciplining yourself to say, I want to speak more life as far as like uplifting words. And sometimes you got to have those hard conversations of like, all right, we're missing the mark,
Yeah.
but it's okay. Let's bring it in. And I want to show you how we can do that. But, I think that happens a lot. And that's why a lot of people get hurt is because, man, the only time I ever hear from you is when I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Like I feel like 9 times out of 10, I get it right. And then the only time I hear from you is when I get it wrong. And that happens. And it's hard because, like I said, a lot of times you don't see it. There's no awareness there because when you're doing it right, I'm not having to, like, when my youth kids are acting right, I'm not really having to deal with, frustrated parents or anything like that. But that one time where a kid's showing out, then the parent comes and approaches me and says that because I got onto them. And it's like, I have to discipline myself and I have to be willing to also point out the positives and also point out the strong points and where they're excelling at.
Yeah, and if you're not going to offer praise, then you're probably not in a place to offer the discipline.
Yeah.
That's true.
You have to give both, and
And that's the building of the relationship.
that's the building of the relationship. If you haven't loved on people, and that's a good point because when I was talking about if the church doesn't discipline you, if your leadership's not disciplining you, that means they don't care about you. Well, the same thing is true if they've never spoke anything else to you, and the only thing you've ever heard from them is correction. Then you're in the same boat. That's going to cause hurt
Absolutely.
because you don't have that relationship. But here's the thing: if your pastor loves on you, tells you they care about you, talks to you, engages with you, but then they also have to tell you, hey, don't do this, or hey, you said this, and hey, let's just be careful because we want to make sure that we're doing things right. That's balanced. But if all you ever get is, hey, I saw you do this, and I don't want to see that again, well, then that can be out of balance. And that can cause not just church hurt, but that also allow pride and puffed upness to be built in the leadership of the church's lives. And that's one of the things that I want us to be better at here. I don't feel like we're terrible at it. We definitely try to love on people. We try to care for people, and we really don't correct people a whole lot. Just one-on-one correction. Because I believe we have a lot of people who truly try to do their best and they correct themselves. We're blessed with a lot of people who are self-correcting, but we do have to bring correction sometimes. I mean, there's times when I have to talk to, parents about their kids doing things in the church. It's like, hey, they don't need to be on the stage, or hey, don't let them in the sound booth, or hey, don't let them be, running around in circles in here because somebody could get hurt. We have some elderly folks or people, even senior people like myself who, if somebody runs out under my feet, somebody could get hurt. The kid could get hurt. You bring that, and a lot of times, some people's parents will blow up on you. They're like, how dare you discipline my kid? You don't have the authority to say something to my kid. It's like, well, I couldn't find you. So, I mean, I didn't want your kid getting hurt. Your kid was fixing to go out the door. Your kid's 3.
Mm-hmm.
We've got security in place. We've got to make sure we're looking out for their well-being.
Yeah.
Even if you're not, we've got to make sure that we are. I saw your kid running with a pair of scissors. So yes, I took them away from your child. I'm sorry that hurt your feelings. I've never had that happen, but I'm just using an example.
Could easily happen.
Could easily happen. It'd probably be Tyler's kids. But I could say that and Tyler'd be like, did you whoop him? I'd be like, no, I didn't whoop him. Why not? But you know, it's one of those things where I've seen people blow up over stuff like that, and it's like you're thinking, dude, like this was like I'm trying to save your kid from getting hurt. That's why I told him to stop running up down the stairs. They're two, and those stairs are steep, and you're mad at me.
Yeah.
And they're like, don't get on my kid, come find me.
Yeah.
And it's like, or are you just concerned with somebody bringing correction, or are you concerned with your child's well-being? Because if it's just about who has authority, well, I mean, it's for me, it wasn't about having authority over your child. For me, it was making sure your child's safe.
Yeah, in all reality, you're the adult in the situation, so
yeah,
the authority falls on you in that moment.
But people get hurt and leave churches over that stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I do want to say one last thing, and then I'm done because I know it's crazy how
Jake's
fast
been on
it
it
goes
tonight,
by.
man.
But
Nope, got like 15 minutes. What are you talking about?
this is the scripture that I had from last week, and this is kind of where the discipline side of it comes into, and we're supposed to work on these things internally, and that's biblical. And I want to share it right out of 1 Corinthians 6, 5-6. It says, "Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers." So here's the thing: is that a lot of times we have these issues with inside a church, and the first thing we want to do is run and file a lawsuit, and that's the things that they were doing in the church. Instead of it's like, okay, so you have a biblical disagreement with each other, or you're having like a moral issue with each other, and you're wanting to go to unbelievers, to people that don't even believe in the Bible, that don't believe in God, and you want them to handle it. How much sense does that make? Now, I'm not saying that the judicial system as a whole, there's no believers in it, but what they were saying here is that you're trying to take moral issues, the foundational principle of God, of being kind and good to each other, and you want people that don't believe in God to handle it. And it makes no sense. And what he's saying is that there's got to be somebody here that's wise enough that can handle this dispute without it blowing up and getting to that point. And the picture that God put in my mind is like, most of the time we don't really run to go find attorneys and try to file a lawsuit and tie it up in court. But there's other judges that we go and look to justify the pain and to justify the hurt we've been through, and we do that in gossip. And we go find people to talk bad about them and be like, man, can you believe they did this? And we start using the way to solve the problems is we start turning to alcohol and drugs and to immoral sexual relations with people and things like that, and we use that to justify it. And if you really think about it, and I'm not against lawsuits by any means whatsoever, but when you go and you file a lawsuit against somebody, almost every time it doesn't fix what happened. Basically, all it's doing is it's paying retributions, and it's bringing justice to say, this bad thing happened. I can't make that go away. I can't fix it. I can't wave a wand and pretend that it never happened. But what I can do is I can make this person pay you a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. In the church, what we should be doing is trying to resolve and overcome that hurt, and not just say, all right, well, I'm the moral authority here, and I'm just going to say you need to pay them a bunch of money, and then everything's good. We're all happy then.
Right.
And that's the thing is we're like, man, I got hurt at church, and it's justified. I'm going to go talk bad about that person and my friends. I'm going to tell everybody they don't need to go to church there. I'm going to start drinking to numb that pain. And a lot of times the substances is that sum of money is that's how we get our justice, and it makes us feel better, and it makes us forget about that pain. And the reality is that find some wise counsel, and it doesn't have to be somebody that's involved in it. It's honestly better for somebody that's just a completely, bystander that is a part of the church to say, hey, can you come in here? We are having a disagreement. Like, I completely think that Jeremy's a bonehead in this situation. We can't overcome it. We can't resolve it. Can you help us out? And sometimes, guess what? At the end of it, we still may not agree.
Yeah.
But what we will agree on is that Jesus died for our sins. And really, that's all that matters. Most of the time, it's like we're fighting over things that's like, I think the lights on the stage should be red. Well, I think they should be blue. And like, well, red represents this and blue represents that, blah, blah. And we're going down these rabbit holes that don't matter. man, we've got to solve it with each other, because guess what? The world is not on our side. The world is not going to take up for us. The world's not going to go to bat for us. They want to see us fail. They want us to see us fall. And yet, for some reason, we go to them and ask them to solve our problems when we should be seeking Jesus together as a church, as a body.
No. And, church hurt, I think we've made it abundantly clear that we understand that church hurt is real.
Absolutely.
People really get hurt. Things really happen that really do damage to people's lives and their minds, really, because it's really, it's a mental thing. It's a mental struggle when it comes to hurt. Sometimes you could just walk away from things and move forward, and sometimes you really struggle with it, but the church hurt's real. But with that being said, I also know that most church hurt is over the silliest things
I was
that it
sitting
could
here just
possibly be over.
thinking the same thing, man. Just the minor things, not the major things, the little things is
Little
what
things.
that causes what it causes.
Yeah, I did not want gray carpet. They put that gray carpet. I'll go to church somewhere else. I don't like chairs. I only like pews. I can't believe they did that. They didn't even care what I had to say. They just took the advice of the other 120 people, and they just ignored the fact that I hated it. So if they're going to do it at the advice of the other 120, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can't believe they painted those walls that color. I hate that color. I'm going to find a church that has walls that are the color I like. I mean, those are the things that people claim the biggest hurt over.
A lot of
And-
times those people come back to.
And and a lot of times they do, and they complain about something else down the road, and you're like, why could they not just go somewhere else? I don't mean that literal, but sometimes I do mean that
I
literal.
want to add to what Jake said. Finding that medium of Jesus is the center, should be the center of it all. We're all children, man. We're all children of God, man. We all are. Even our children are children of God, and we're just here to help guide them along the way until they become an adult and they start their lives and then all that. But you take a child and just exclude mine. You
Your
either
kids are awesome.
yeah, mine they can be a little thuggish ruggish sometimes, but they are. Is that Tommy?
I think we got Tommy on the phone.
Hey, Tom.
Finally.
He's been real quiet tonight.
Yeah, Tommy, you hadn't said a whole lot tonight.
I'm talking tonight.
Yeah, man. You should see what Jeremy had to say for you. He run you in the ground tonight, man.
I just put a giant picture up of you on the screen, and every time I had a question for you, I'd just make you say, yeah, whatever, man.
Oh, me.
So, do you have anything to add about church hurt tonight, Tommy? And discipline?
I guess for me, I don't know what all you guys have talked about tonight. And I know we're going to talk about discipline tonight and how to overcome church hurt. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, just something me and you talked about before, Jeremy. Something that's big for me is just, realizing that even, let's say that somebody in a church hurts you, right? And you just kind of look past the person and see that, where it's coming from. It may be coming from somewhere that's a place that they're hurting too, and they don't even realize what they're doing. And so I think when you kind of look at things that way, it kind of helps overcome that. It's a little easier to offer forgiveness that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You just kind of look past what they've done to you and see where it's coming from for them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's hard to talk to you whenever you're wearing a cowboy hat on a picture on my screen. But no, I do know where you're coming from. And, that's one of the things we've talked about tonight, is like the discipline aspect of it and, how people respond to the discipline when you're trying to do something to help them and they perceive it as, as hurting them. And that's kind of been our focus on everything tonight is, how to overcome that, how to overcome the church hurt. And I think the real thing is, if you wanted to sum it up, and at least for me, the way that I would want to sum it up for the best way to overcome church hurt is to realize that people are flawed. People are going to make mistakes. People hurt people, and people are hurt by people. But at the end of the day, when we view that every one of us is not perfect, we're all imperfect human beings, but we serve a perfect God. I think we can find some common ground, and then maybe we can talk things out rather than just allowing the hurt to have the final word. I think when you allow the hurt to have the final word, you allow Satan um, to gain a victory, and Satan shouldn't gain any victories. Satan is defeated. He's the loser in this game. So, my voice is cracking. I sound like a 13-year-old boy again.
I
Yeah,
think
that's absolutely right, dude. It's like it's a wound, right? And if you don't do anything to take care of that wound, to help it heal and help it recover, it just festers and it gets worse, right?
Right. Yep.
I think a lot of kind of what Tommy's saying is that, and it ties into the relationship side of it, is that when you know somebody and you know what they're going through, and it's like, man, this isn't like this person. They normally don't do that, and then you know kind of what's going on behind closed doors, and you're like, man, they're speaking out of hurt. Is it right? No, but the reason they're attacking me or the reason they're tearing me down is because they just lost a loved one or they just lost their job or they've got this going on, things like that. And that all comes back to the relationship of knowing the person.
Yeah. If you don't know somebody's situation, it's easy to think, well, that was silly that they got upset about that, but you don't know what they're going through outside of the situation that's being addressed. And I've been there before. I've been like, well, that's dumb. I use some really mean words sometimes, like dumb and stupid, but sometimes you look at things and you're like, that's dumb. Why are they upset about that? I mean, why did that hurt their feelings? But what I don't understand is the situation that they're going through outside of the church house, that they're having issues with their spouse or with a sibling or with their children. And that was just the icing on the cake. The cake was already there. Well, now I just told them they could have their cake and here's some icing to frost it over with. And that's the final straw for them. So the other stuff kind of at that point, when you're the icing on the cake kind of becomes okay and the icing becomes the enemy. And I think that happens in church a lot. And that's why the church kind of takes the blunt of that entire situation, because it's, I'm going through this and all this is happening. And when the preacher gets up to preach, and I said it, I think last week, they assume that the reason you addressed that and the reason that was spoken was because you have inside information about their personal situation. Sometimes preachers are bad to do that. You have information about somebody's situation, so you just start to hammer on what they're going through for the entire message because you're like, I'm going to get them to an altar today so you can feel like you had some success in reaching somebody. And you may even have good intentions behind it. But a lot of times that does more harm than good because they're like, now I know the truth. Everybody's just talking about me behind my back. They're talking about my issues. They're talking about my problems. They ought to be dealing with their own. And a lot of times that's just not the case. A lot of times people genuinely want to help somebody. But we have to understand that, they've got real issues outside of the church that also have to be addressed and dealt with. And we need to do that in love, with patience and kindness.
That's right. That's where I was at. Y'all actually, Tommy stepped in and he said exactly what I was fixing to say, man. You got that major that if you don't have that discipline, you just run rampant. And if you got too much of it, you become so afraid.
Yeah.
But if you find that perfect medium of seeing whatever the situation is, looking at it through the eyes of Jesus, you'll be able to pour out that love. And it may be in your circumstance, and that person that's trying to correct you may be doing it out of love. And if you're trying to correct them, it may just be you looking at them through the eyes of Jesus so you can show them how you love them. If we can get that medium found out, that perfect medium, that right in the middle, then I think we can change the world, man, easily. If we can see it like Jesus sees it, man.
Yeah. Well, Tommy, you want the final word, man? We got like 1 minute and 25 seconds.
Just to kind of come back onto something you just talked about there, Jeremy. Just knowing a situation, and then you get up there thinking I'm gonna get them to an altar, and all that kind of stuff. When you're preaching, like that's where we mess up as men, right? Like if we don't let the Holy Spirit lead us in that, He knows when the right time is to address things and to knows exactly what they need to get them through something, and we don't. We only see what's on the outside. That's why we can't really just go off of feelings. We've always got to trust Him.
That's right. Put our trust in Him. Don't allow emotions to rule our lives. The Bible says the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can tame it? And or who can try? No, it's at the tongue. You can't tame the
Oh,
tongue.
you can't tame the tongue.
Yeah, I'm mixing two scriptures together, man. That's what happens when I shoot from the hip like a cowboy. But the Bible does say the heart is deceitful above all things. So anyway, you can't trust your emotions. People say follow your heart. You can't just follow your
That's
heart. You
all.
have to follow the word of God and be led by the Holy Spirit. That is correct.
There you go.
Man,
Yeah.
I love that one scene in Fireproof. I know it's kind of a cheesy movie, but he's like, you
How
can't
dare
follow your
you.
heart. You have to lead your heart because your heart can be easily deceived. You have to, take hold of it and guide it.
How dare you call anything with Kirk Cameron in it cheesy? How dare you?
It's all cheesy, but I love every bit of it.
What-
Well, except for the older stuff, but
One of the greatest actors of our generation. Did you know? And I'll leave this. This will be our closing thought for this week's podcast. Did you know that when Kirk Cameron was on the set of Growing Pains, he saw this girl who was new actress on the set, and she's over there and she's listening to her Walkman on the headphones. You know what a Walkman is?
Mhm.
You guys aren't that old, but I figured you might know. But anyway, she's over there listening to some music. He said, "Hey, what you listen to?" She goes, "Oh, it's this band you probably would never have heard of them. They're a Christian rock band." And he goes, "I don't know, I might." And she said, "Well, they're called Petra." And Kirk Cameron's like, "Yeah, I love Petra." And she's like, "Oh, really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he started like singing a song, "More power to you," or something like that. I think that was the song. And she's like, "Wow, you really do know Petra." That woman today is his wife. You know why they're married? Because the power of Petra. Just closing on that. Another shout out to Petra
and
Yeah.
Kirk, we love you.
and Kirk. Love you. Anyway, love you guys. Tommy, tell everybody bye.
Hi, everybody. Love you guys.
Bye, man. Love you.
See you
Thank
later,
y'all for
buddy.
tuning in. Join us next week on the podcast of The Wayfinder. See you
Yeah.
then.